Hello. It's great to be with you during an incredibly exciting week of transition. I think there are a lot of us who are just sighing with relief that we're moving on to the next stage. And there are a lot of businesses out there that have really put things on pause with anticipation around, what's going to happen with this new administration. But I think there's probably no greater sigh of relief than possibly in the cannabis industry, which has been in flux for a lot of different reasons. But now 2021 certainly looks like an incredibly exciting year. And we have today a leader with us who I think does an amazing job at really supporting and highlighting diversity as a core part of the cannabis ecosystem and as part of his leadership. So, and I think we saw some great examples of that during the inauguration. I know I cried my eyes out. I'm not embarrassed to admit it was very inspiring. So today we have got Ben Larson, who's the founder and CEO of Vertosa. And I will be fully transparent in that I am an angel investor in Vertosa, a very proud investor. I'm really happy with the way that the business is going. So today, Ben is going to share a bit about the state of play with cannabis and the business Vertosa, and also tell you a bit about himself. So I'd like to welcome Ben.
Hey, Angel. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So Ben, I think it'd be great, if you would tell us, a bit about you and how you got into cannabis from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because I think there are a lot of people out there that have said, with all of the, medicinal and then recreational loosening of regulations and a lot more clarity around the state of play in different states and nationally, still lots of questions, but with increased opportunity, I think that there are a lot of people who are looking at cannabis from an either investor standpoint and entrepreneur standpoint, but also there are a lot of people out there that just want more, cannabis products, whether you're talking about CBD or THC or hybrid, et cetera. So if you could tell us a little bit about what inspired you to get into the sector and also to create Vertosa, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an incredible industry to be a part of. This week was certainly a big deal, but for those of us that have been fighting the good fight for a number of years and advocating for the industry, we know it's just it's not the finish line, it's the starting line for us, and it's just like this provides us the playing field to get out there and really make the change that we need. And for me, I recognized that change about 5 years ago. 2015, I was managing global operations for an early stage startups program called Founder Institute, flying all around the world, starting new startup ecosystems, and just loved helping facilitate the creation of people's ideas and letting them create the companies of their dreams. And that's what my true passion is, and eventually what brought me into the cannabis industry. As an entrepreneur, you often take your skill sets and try to find the biggest problems that you can solve. And I recognize that the cannabis industry could use my skill set in helping build supportive ecosystems, helping guide founders and helping them validate their ideas and raise money. And so 2015, 2016 is when my partner and I launched Gateway, which was a startup incubator here in the Bay Area that was really kind of trying to not only invest in companies and grow them, but also create a sense of mentorship and rising tide mentality in the cannabis industry. And so it was part business, part advocacy, and it was just clear that this industry deserved to be legal, destigmatized, and not, put in the same realm of hard drugs or even alcohol and tobacco. There's just so many benefits for many different categories, which we can dive into later. But in building Gateway, just realizing how early it is for this industry and how far it has to go to really achieve kind of that mainstream appeal. So product reliability, infrastructure, just mainstream brands or appeal at least. These were all things that we've tackled as an industry in the last 5 years and continue to strive for. And so, after about 3 years of running the incubator, really realized that there's all these companies that were coming into the space pitching these billion-dollar ideas, but there was a big disconnect as to how you get to that billion-dollar valuation. Like we all in the startup world, it's like, okay, what's your go-to-market strategy? You could usually figure that out, but it's like when the market isn't fully developed, like how do you build a startup within a startup when so much is out of your control? And that's why a lot of us in the industry as entrepreneurs, it's like, if you're an entrepreneur in cannabis, you're automatically an advocate. You're automatically a lobbyist. Like you have to get involved because the future of your business and your personal life depend on it. And so in doing that, I really started to focus on what are the mechanisms that will allow this industry to grow and scale. And there was this trend in California, especially, to vertically integrate, to own the supply chain from seed to sale, so to speak. But that's not how traditional supply chains are established. You have role players, people that specialize in key aspects to create a scalability, to allow others to come and build off of you. And that was the inspiration for creating Vertosa. We are an ingredient technology company that kind of speeds along those product development. It's like, you want to create a product, we will tell you how to do it, and we'll make the ingredients that you can rely on that creates a consistent and approachable product. And from day one, we're like, we're not going to try to do more than what our specialty is. Even
though I pressure you occasionally, even from
day one
standpoint, purely from a consumer. As an investor, I love that you focused on B2B because the TAM overall, the total addressable market is much bigger, and your costs are lower because we know how costly it is to build consumer brands, especially when you're still at the market making stage. But I just, as a consumer, I can see so much opportunity.
Yeah, I know. It's some of our very early investors, including you, we're just like, oh, what about like I'm not gonna say who, but they're like, oh, what about like 5 Hour High? I'm like 5 Hour Energy? I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. I'm like, that's exactly why we're not gonna do it, because that branding is terrible. Not only that, it was just, we saw the opportunity to improve everyone's products, right? And to play kind of just a supportive role, like the Intel inside, so to speak, right? And so we pushed back constantly in our first year of operation when we were really small. We were like 3 of us, and everyone's like, this is nice, but can we just acquire you guys? Like, how much for exclusivity? And it's like, no exclusivity, no acquisitions. Like, we are building this for everyone to lift up the industry. And that's what we've been doing ever since. For 2.5 years, we've been leading with science, building trust, earning trust every day, and just really excited about where it's led us. We are kind of integral to the supply chain, and we have partners and friends all around us, right? It's like, whether you're an oil manufacturer or a co-packer or a brand, we're all working together to just create the best products. And that's the beautiful full circle of everything, is that my passion is for helping people realize their dreams, right? And so people might come to us and say, hey, we just need to put THC or CBD in our product, and we'll happily serve them. But I love it when like an entrepreneur comes and they say, here's my pitch deck. And it's like, I get to start asking questions about like, well, who are you trying to sell this to? What's the experience that you're trying to market? And that's when like the startup me kicks in and I get to do a little bit of advising, but what comes out of that is a well-formulated, targeted product that has a chance of survival. So
and I
a
think
little self-serving.
for sure, and I think we should tell people what Vertosa is and what it produces. Before,
Good starting point usually.
yeah, because so much of what you're doing, but so much of market making in itself is co-creation, right? And how I originally, started to get into the space is through our venture studio at Co-Created. And we had a big client who was looking at this sector, right? And looking at it from a beverages standpoint, but also looking at it from other, other potential products. And, in the work that we do, we'll work with big corporations who are either facing disruption in the marketplace or they see opportunity in the marketplace, but it's not core to their business and they need to stay focused on their core, business. So they'll partner with us so that we can create adjacent businesses in entirely new markets, right? We leverage their deep domain expertise or their distribution capacity or their brands or whatever. And so I had an opportunity, almost like you with the incubator, to really see, a good market. Radical is one of the businesses in our portfolio, and they do something called RAD reports. So they did, a complete scan of the market and looked at all of the different players, from startups to investors to big corps who are looking at the space. So I felt like when we first met, I had a real unfair advantage compared to other investors to be able to go, oh my God, this is exactly the business that I want to invest in. But we should tell them what that business is, what Vertosa does.
Yeah, I mean, so at the end of the day, we're a trusted ingredient manufacturer, and in the cannabis and hemp space. So we focus on cannabinoids, terpenes, and we try to take the whole philosophy is one size does not fit all. And that goes from the cannabinoids and terpenes that you want to put into a product, whether it's just purely CBD or whether it's a full spectrum sun-grown extraction out of Humboldt, California, right? And so we try to provide that flexibility. We also understand that the packaging and the manufacturing process, all this kind of influences the stability, compatibility of the formulation. And so we focus a lot on doing the R&D to understand those impacts and the efficacy of the end product. So we do a lot of product development work, but at the end of the day, it's all driving to selling bulk ingredients so that you can create consistent products over and over again, and that you can scale. Because producing these ingredients, you might be able to do it on a bench top and you might be able to make 500 units, but what happens when you're trying to make 50,000 units? And we help people get to that scale. We work with co-packers and we can deliver, everywhere from, well, a small bottle of infused ingredients that like we've given our sample kits, up to 50 gallons to like dump into a large tank. So we've cut our teeth on one of the more exciting parts of the industry, and that's the emerging infused beverage category. Made waves back when Constellation invested a large chunk of cash into Canopy growth, but it's been developing ever since, and it is still developing. It's a very small portion of the market, and that's because you're talking about the need to build an entire supply chain. So beverages is where we kind of really earn our name. A lot of the beverages, especially in the California market, have Vertosa inside. You might sometimes see it on a label, you might not. And it's also, kind of led us down the path of, how can we improve the experience in other types of products? So we recently started creating, fast-acting gummies, where we're shrinking the droplet size and making the cannabinoids more bioavailable so that it doesn't take, an hour and a half to feel the effects of an edible. We've also recently developed a powdered formulation for the hemp side of the business that creates just really beautiful, fast-acting and dispersible kind of beverage mixes or press tablets and that. So I guess the vision is that you have an idea for a product and that we can tell you and give you the ingredients to make it happen, right? But we're really excited about beverage. I think what people need to know about the beverage category is that it's a completely unique experience. It's a category completely of its own. I think it's super approachable. People are just very used to consuming beverages, having beverages, and the form factor itself allows you to microdose and just really control the experience. But it takes patience and persistence. And so building out the supply chain, distribution, a very boring side of business, typically for a consumer, but like, when the status quo is moving around very concentrated concentrates and cannabis flower, that is much easier to justify than shipping around large amounts of liquid. The retailers, the distributors just weren't prepared for that form factor. And so, along with our partners in the supply chain, just kind of having to grow this organically and prove it, prove the market demand, prove the sell through, and just kind of continue to believe. But there is no better motivator than when you go to a dinner party and let people experience it for the first time, and you have people in their 60s and 70s trying cannabis for the first time because they would never touch a joint or a vape, but they'll easily pick up a beverage and having an incredible experience, and then be like, wait, I'm not going to be hungover tomorrow, and like, this is low calorie.
When you and I first met, I think it was at Emily's house when we first met in person. And you and Harold, I think, made, it was like these amazing THC alcohol-free mojitos. I think it was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we had mojitos and Moscow mules, I believe. Just try to make it as approachable as possible.
Yeah, two of my favorites. And the thing is, for me, having been, a soccer player and playing in the English Premier League and, playing competitively in college, building up to that, I wasn't going to smoke pot. I was also illegal then, but, and even now I don't necessarily like to smoke. And I also don't consume a lot of the edibles because, I had gestational diabetes. And so I'm always kind of borderline, there. And so I like to keep my sugar down. And a lot of the edibles, do have sugar in them. But a lot, and so do some of the beverages, but a lot of them don't, like what I had last night, which I think is one.
Yeah.
Like
Lagunitas is doing a great job in the industry. Where, it was product's great, but just having the mainstream brands like entering this space is just a huge validation for all the hard work that everyone's doing. So even if you're not doing cannabis beverage, getting brands like Lagunitas into the industry is a huge, just a signal for what's to come.
For sure. I think it's a validation. It also brings more consumer brand awareness, and for me, like, when I tell people when they come, haven't had too many guests over this period, but when I have had guests, and I say, do you want, like, in Lagunitas, a little something is one of my favorite beers, but I don't drink it. But I tell people, well, you can have a beer that has no calories, no carbs, no sugar, tastes really good, and you still can get a buzz. And they're like, what is this? And so then, when I show them, the high five and they try it for the first time, they absolutely love it. And I think a lot of cannabis products, people want to try them in the kind of setting that you were describing. If you've got somebody in their 60s and, either they haven't had cannabis before or they just haven't had it in beverage form, then having it at a house is always, a way that you can kind of trust that, that you're going to like have a great experience.
Yeah, well, and it being January and a lot of people trying dry January, my phone's kind of been ringing off the hook from my friends being like, "Hey, where do I get some of that stuff? This is really hard." And I'm like, "Cali sober, right? It's like cannabis is okay, but the alcohol is not," which is great because it is low calorie. And like, one of our other collaborations recently, PBR did their cannabis seltzer, and it just it can't keep it on the shelves, and it's just creating a great opportunity to give people another outlet. And there's something for everyone. We've worked with House of Saka and Viva Oak and Ricketts to create really great wine replacements. And it's actually de-alcoholized wine, from California grapes that we're then putting the fun back in, and it's lower calorie. We're messing around with minor cannabinoids to create different effects. Viva Oak did a red wine, which was a challenge in itself from a chemistry perspective, which I won't bore everyone with, but we did a THCV formulation to create a little bit higher energy, try to reduce the tendency for munchies, and just starting to mess around with that, which I love getting into the purpose-built formulations. You mentioned sports earlier. On the hemp side of the business, which we do operate, just really think about how do cannabinoids interact with other nutraceuticals to create very targeted effects, whether it's sports recovery, anti-anxiety and relaxation, what have you. So it's really inspiring to see how other brands are starting to think about how cannabinoids might become a part of their journey, not necessarily just as a category in of its own, but to create more efficacious products.
Mm-hmm. And do you've got, do you want to share one of those products, or should, because I've
Sure.
got
Yeah, thanks for queuing me up, doing my job. we like I mentioned, we're starting to kind of branch out of liquid emulsions and into some powdered formats, which has led us into a really great partnership with Lucent Botanicals and creating these just very beautiful, efficacious mints. And it's a beautiful story. Again, for us, it's about helping people create their dreams, not just ours. And so we'll play the short video, and let Chris speak for himself.
Thanks. And so this is a new product extension for you guys.
That's right.
Great.
Lucent Botanicals started a few years ago with me and my partner, Arnell. Both of our mothers, who are now aged 84 and age 90, who have difficulty with pain relief, some sleeping issues, things like that. And we found that CBD worked okay for them. But we also thought that we could do a better job of making products than a lot of the products that were on the market. We thought that making mints was a much better solution. Our family members really liked them, that they worked really well, that they were pretty fast acting and potent. If our family members liked them enough, that other people might as well. What we found is that Vertosa makes products that will enable us to make a different and also in some ways better product. So what people notice in our new formulation with the new products is that what may have taken 10, 15, 20 minutes to hit once you take the mint and it's a chewable mint, that now with Vertosa's product takes only about 5 minutes. So the biggest advantage is that it helps you dose a little bit easier because you get faster feedback. So the faster the onset is, the faster you will be able to make adjustments in your dose to get the right amount. And the second reason, of course, is simply quicker effects if you're looking for focus, or quicker sleep, perhaps, if you're looking for sleep. We really enjoy making CBD products, and we enjoy the benefits that it brings to people, not only our own relatives, but also our customers. We get so many testimonials from people who say that this is the only product that really solves their problem. Vertosa has been a great supplier. They have gone well above and beyond what most of our suppliers do. Making mints is not an easy thing, and working with the Vertosa people has, on an interactive basis, has helped us get the formulations right and get the product to the point that it can be brought to market quicker.
I love that. We always need good storytelling with cannabis products.
The unspoken element here is that I think there's a lot of people out there that still question the viability and efficacy of CBD. And unfortunately, because of just how slow the federal government can be, there's very few regulations on the hemp side of the business. So you do still have a lot of snake oil out there, and you might try a product that you like, I don't know if it's working, but if it's formulated correctly, you will absolutely feel the effects of the hemp or CBD. And that's what's important to us. And so we take great offense actually to people putting bad products out on the market, because it breaks down the trust of an entire industry. And so, that's what drives us every day. It's not the profits of our company. It's actually creating impact and an opportunity for medicine, essentially. However you define medicine, but for it to be out there and accessible to people, and something that they can trust and feel.
Well, I think a lot of people, especially during COVID, have turned to cannabis because they trust it to help them. And whether that's CBD or a combination of CBD and THC, which we might want to explain for people who don't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people have turned to those products in markets where they can, because of the increased anxiety that a lot of people have had. And they find that it helps them just, relax, takes a little bit of the edge off without, getting drunk and consuming lots of sugar and alcohol and having a hangover. They can just have something which just kind of, relaxes them a little bit and, helps them ride out this pandemic. I don't know if you've seen that in the market in California or in other markets.
I mean, obviously seen it, but experienced it personally. I'm always, anyone that knows me, I'm a huge skeptic of everything and anything, government, startups, whatever it is. I'm just like, it's my job to constantly question, and we've built our company around that. Like we constantly say internally, it's like we are our greatest competition. Like we have to constantly push ourselves to be better. The government's not going to do it for us. A lot of times, we're pushing the standard. We're the ones who took and saw like the efficacy requirements that the regulations were rolling out in California. It's like, we're just going to apply that to hemp, even though no one's forcing us to. Like, this is what needs to happen. And for me, I used to struggle with alcohol, right? Like many people, especially coming out of the U.S. college system. And not only did it accidentally like wean me off of that, I just realized like I started having less of a need or a desire for the alcohol. But I also have just a very active mind, again, it's like many entrepreneurs do. And I have started using it as just a tool to like help me ease my mind and go to sleep. And where I used to average about 4 to 5 hours a night, I can now consistently get 7 to 8 hours and feel just very rested and very healthy. And that impact is like intangible, and it's hard to explain. And so what's important with all of this, because there are so many applications, like cannabis is really hard to put in a bucket, and especially in Western culture, we love throwing things into buckets. And it's one of those things where the only way forward is to provide unfettered access in many different form factors that speak to people's needs, and let people create based on the way they see it being used. And so you might use it as a social tool, right? To go out and release your inhibitions and just have a fun night. But you might also use it purely for relief. I remember my aunt was diagnosed with jaw cancer, and she was in a lot of pain. She wasn't eating because she was nauseous, and she wasn't sleeping because of the pain. And with one product, like, and anyone in the industry be like, oh, she probably needs a strong indica, like spin up the appetite, relieve the pain, and let her sleep. Overnight, with one product, it was a vape pen. It was formulated by a company that I work closely with. One cartridge, one pen, and overnight, she was sleeping through the night, she was eating again, and the pain was gone.
That's
And it's amazing, but it's also like very upsetting and just infuriating to know that people don't know about this, people don't have access to it, because we can't get out of our own way. The government can't get out of our way. The stigma won't get out of our way. So we just have to keep fighting for those reasons, right? Like, we have to create access for people, and there's so many applications. Athletes, like the UFC just finally took marijuana testing out of their doping testings, and so the athletes were begging for this for years, because there's neuroprotective qualities, there's the inflammation, or the reduced inflammation and recovery attributes, and obviously pain relief. But like, it's just a slow process, and we're making these incremental steps. And similar to how we started off the call, with times like this week, where we have a changing of the guard in our favor, it's not a sigh of relief. It's like, stand up and get to work, which has been really interesting from a business perspective, because you try to do strategic planning, and especially as years wrap up, and we found ourselves in December, and it'd be, for everyone, a phenomenally challenging year. Even if business was good, it was still hard to navigate the pandemic for 10 months. And we're sitting here, it's like, all right, let's do our 2021 planning. It's like, well, we have this election that is inconclusive, and like, what's going to happen? It's like, well, let's plan for the worst. And then miraculously, Georgia flips, and our best case scenario became our worst case scenario. And it's just like, all right, everyone, it is time to make sure that we're putting in the hard work to create the future that we see, that we know that other people don't, because only the people working in the industry knows how it needs to be established. And those conversations need to be had. So we need to get in front of the legislators, we need in front of our council people, and just make sure that they're educated and creating a solid framework. And as you mentioned, making sure that we're doing it equitably, and providing opportunities for those impacted by the war on drugs, this heinous war on drugs that's been lasting for decades and decades. And people still today are getting blocked out for doing something that is now legal. So there's just a lot of work to be done there. And it starts with the grassroots level, with your local legislators, with these state initiatives, and then on up to the federal government.
And so, and you're in California, and but you're expanding into new markets. So what's the current state of play from a regulatory standpoint, medicinal versus recreational, or just behind the times and not catching up? And it seems like Oklahoma is really taking off. And I know Michigan has got a great company there called Pleasantries, and some other great companies there. And the city of Detroit is starting to look at, how they should evolve potentially their policies. So, what's happening with Vertosa in terms of expanding outside of California, and the kind of state of play in some of these other markets?
Yeah, I would say momentum is picking up for us as a company, and for the industry as a whole. So you see legislation getting passed and then quickly evolving. And so Oklahoma is a great example. They released a fairly flexible medical program. A lot of medical patients in Oklahoma, it's a startling amount, actually, for it being kind of like, what some might consider like a more conservative state. But it went so phenomenally well that they're quickly just going to roll it into a recreational market and provide, just open, unfettered access. And just because it's recreational doesn't mean people aren't using it for medical purposes, right? And I think that's the biggest cognitive disconnect. Some people will be like, "Oh, I sort medical, but not recreational." I'm like, what is recreational? Is a glass of scotch at the end of a long day not somewhat medical? So I think from a Western culture perspective, we just maybe need to change our thinking a little bit about health and wellness, which I think the new generation is fully on board with. And if we're all just patient, maybe we will get that change we need. Vertosa in particular, So last year we launched with our partner up in Canada, and so we are working with various co-packers up there to get approvals through Health Canada. It's a completely different system. Hemp and cannabis are regulated under the same framework, and it's important for people to become exposed to those vast differences that might happen in different regions, right? And we've take those learnings and have quickly spun up operations in Massachusetts with another partner, Theory Wellness in Massachusetts, and just really excited to kind of continue to offer the same quality of ingredients across state borders. And inherently, what that allows us to do is provide the confidence for brands to then navigate launching their brands across different states, right? Which is quite difficult right now. There's no cross-state commerce, and there probably won't be, even with federal legalization. It won't be like all of a sudden the floodgates open and you can ship everywhere. Alcohol took a long time to develop their framework, and it'll probably be the same for cannabis. And the what makes this country great, like the independence of the states and everything, also kind of makes it challenging to pass broad sweeping access for cannabis. Next on the docket actually is Michigan for us. Michigan and Oklahoma are coming up very soon, and we were really excited to see the positioning on infused products shift in Michigan. I think just in the last 2 weeks, and so we're going full speed ahead and excited. It's every market's a little bit different, and I think Michigan, out of all the states, is just very deserving of this new generation of business opportunity, right? Like, we all know what happened with like the auto era and the impacts in Detroit, and man, what a hero story for cannabis to be able to come back and be a new breath of life into the community. And again, it's as far as a healthful replacement for alcohol, there's just so much opportunity there. So excited to in short order be releasing some infused beverages and some fast acting gummies coming to Michigan very soon.
I'm very excited about that. Then I don't have to hide them in my luggage when I go back home.
I can neither confirm nor deny that I do the same thing everywhere I travel.
TSA have better things to worry about. But one of the things that I love as an investor and somebody who's committed to social justice and gender equity is I really believe you do a great job at exposing a lot of the, injustices that have happened in terms of the war on drugs and some of the racial discrimination. And I also think as a leader, you've done a really great job really giving a lot of leadership opportunities and a lot of public acknowledgement also to your female employees and team members. So I would just, love for you to share a little bit about what you think other cannabis entrepreneurs and businesses should consider in terms of, the really developing the market in such a way that there is more equity, that, we're starting to look at how conscious capitalism can really be a force for good beyond just profits.
Yeah, I mean, I could approach this conversation in many different ways. Like if I was speaking to a pure capitalist, I'd be like, there's a pure capitalist answer to that, right? There's plenty of Harvard Business Reviews that show like if you want to speak to all demographics, like most big businesses try to do, like you have to have that represented systemically throughout your company. And if it's not, like it's not going to be genuine. And if it's not genuine, it's not going to sell. So there's that aspect. But for me personally and my why, I just don't know any other way. I was born and raised in California on Martin Luther King weekend. I think 7 years out of my life journey, I've shared a birthday with his day. He was born on the 17th. I was born on the 18th. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Not bragging. But and on top of that, I grew up around women. I I remember most of my childhood, I had a babysitter that had 3 daughters, and she watched, my sister and these 2 twin girls, and that was my friend circle. So I just trust women more, and I don't know, it's just natural. So that's ingrained in me, but I don't know. It's our social responsibility to walk the walk, and donating to LPP, which is a great organization that we support, but like, that's not enough. Giving money is not enough. If you look at your team page and it's very monochromatic, like, there's some changes that need to happen, and there's nothing to blame but yourself, because it starts at the very beginning. Like when we started the company, it was top of mind. As we brought people in, it was top of mind. And I'll say, like, when we first started the company, we were very male heavy, and I was like, this has to stop. Like, we have to find first women to bring on. We were all, being in California, I'll admit, being in California is fairly easy to be multicultural, right? A little bit harder if you're like in, call it, the Carolinas or something. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't work out there, so I don't want to like judge. But if you are having that problem, start with recruiting, like, and start with your board, and start with your executive team, and like put people in places of power so that you're attractive to recruits, right? Like, people want to work at places where they can see themselves elevating. And if there's no one at the top, like, why would you want to go work there if you don't see a path for yourself? And so I don't know. It's, at the end of the day, again, it all comes back down, like, consumers of cannabis come in all different sexes, colors, identifications, and you need to be able to speak to those if you're going to build a well-rounded company.
For sure. I think, there's lots of different types of diversity as well. Like, a lot of times we think, gender, race, but there's also neurodiversity. Like, one of the things that I really loved about the inauguration is that you had this incredible, like, inspiring poet, and I just ended up crying. And you've got this president, both who shared speech impediments, and and you've got, so there's diversity in terms of all the more obvious or transparent aspects, but there's also diversity in terms of thought, in terms of class, in terms of neurodiversity, people who have had different kinds of challenges, but who are also very exceptional and who can, create and a lot of value and offer a lot. And so I think, we really have a responsibility, as I feel like I have a responsibility as an angel investor and also as an entrepreneur. And when I'm working in the venture studio, creating these, startups with big corporations, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's easy if you just reach out to your existing network, but if your existing network looks somewhat like a mirror of you, then you do have to put a little more work in to tap into other communities. And a lot of that diversity of thought and representation contributes to better products and services. Like you said, there's an enormous amount of data, but I feel like we constantly have to remind people that this data exists, that, when you've got more diverse teams and leadership, that, you end up in most cases creating more profit, better returns, and typically also higher levels of satisfaction in terms of job satisfaction. So, but it does require some extra work sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to be honest, it was also like a survival mechanism coming into the cannabis industry for me. I recognized very early on that I was an outsider. There's a lot of work that had been done, a lot of sacrifice that had been done for this industry, and me coming in and trying to profit off it wasn't the ethical thing to do, and it wasn't going to make me successful in the end, right? So I came in wearing that on my sleeve, being like, I need everyone's help, and I'm willing to help everyone, right? And it was kind of that mentality that helped me build my network in the space, right? And why I'm generally pretty recognized in the space. Outside of Vertosa, still, I host the Marijuana Today podcast periodically. I you know, continually mentor young companies or get involved with mentorship programs for underserved entrepreneurs. And I don't come from any, I guess, traditional business background, right? I studied civil engineering at Cal Poly. I was a professional engineer for 6 years. I quit all that to my parents' behest and jumped into startups and, you know, just kind of fumbled my way around until I really found what I was passionate about, and that was just helping people break down barriers. So again, I think I don't know, have a leg up on this conversation because it's just kind of ingrained in me and into who I am. Like my passion is breaking down barriers for people, and I see the biggest barrier, especially highlighted last year, is just the disparities in our society. And so we have a lot of work to do, and if we're not actively doing it, then we're not helping. So, you know.
Yeah, I think that's what, you know, a lot of, you know, people say, well, if I'm not actively doing anything bad, then, you know, that's good enough. But no, we have to proactively do
nothing. Yeah, nothing is bad.
Yeah.
Period. You know, nothing is bad. Don't do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy more infused products, but
that's right.
So, you know, a lot of, if you can say a bit about what, you know, from your perspective, what makes a good investor, you know, because people who are considering investing in this sector who don't have a lot of experience might shy away from it. So, so one of the questions is, you know, hopefully I'm a good investor. I try, you know, my ethos is I don't invest anything that I'm not willing to help in terms of not just the capital, but I will offer to help, you know, bring on customers. I will offer to help bring on talent into the team. So getting into some of those other communities, like we talked about, you know, being a sounding board for, you know, marketing or strategy, and, you know, but also not overstepping as well, not being the distraction or the, you know, annoyance, because, you know, running a business is hard enough, and managing, you know, investors takes time. So, you know, so I try to just offer up, and as you know, but what, when people are thinking about becoming an investor, what are some of the things you think they should consider when looking at cannabis as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when looking at the space, first there's a mindset, right? Sure, there might be green rush opportunities, but really you're trying to build a category, and that takes patience, insight, patience not only in deploying your capital, but patience in seeing it come to fruition.
Yeah.
You know, I have a number of investors that were in my portfolio, you know, when I was on the other side of the table, that asked me, it's like, oh, when are we going to see liquidity? I'm like, I'll let you know. I'm like,
9 years?
I don't know. Yeah. 5 to 10 years, like a typical angel investor. I don't know. You know, when are we going to see federal legalization? I don't know. So there's that side. The other side is just solid due diligence, lots of questions, right? And checking and having clarity on what the assumptions are for that growth opportunity, and understanding what the next horizon is. Like, how are you going to get to a point where you're either surviving and cash flow positive, or attractive enough to get new capital, bigger capital? And what are you assuming is going to happen to enable that? And if one of those assumptions is something completely out of your control, press them. Like, how are you going to survive if that doesn't happen?
Right.
And I don't see enough investors asking those questions. You know, it's like, oh, federal legalization, billion-dollar company. It's like, okay, but if you're spending millions of dollars trying to get eyeballs now that are super fleeting because they're jumping to the next shiny object, and we don't get legalization for 5 years, how are you going to bridge that gap? Mm-hmm. And so that's what's burned a lot of investors in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've,
you know, the other.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it's a little, I lagged there a little bit. The other element I think that's important is that you know, what needs to be invested in the space isn't always pure like venture opportunities. I think angel investing, VC has gotten us really attuned to that kind of like hockey stick growth. You put here, you see that 1,000x return. It might happen in some cases. I'm hoping we can provide that, but there's just fundamental investment that needs to be done in supply chain, and that might come in the form of blended capital or just different types of vehicles. And there's no silver bullet, but I will tell you that it's like we need investment in distribution companies. We need investment in co-packers. We need investment in retailers, and those historically aren't venture scalable in the typical sense, like a technology company, or we've seen them flame out like miraculously, like MedMen, and we just need to be careful. We need to know that we can't just dump a bunch of money in with like a finite timeline, knowing that timeline is totally out of our control.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there have been challenges. I'm an early investor in Ease, and there have been challenging times across that journey, and you just had to be patient and and supportive and just kind of ride it out, because it's it's not startups are rarely just straightforward growth. Even those ones that do get that hockey stick and do get that unicorn status, billion plus, it's rarely just a straight shot. So I think but are you guys are maybe opening up a little in your round? What's the fundraising?
Yeah, so we've raised a good chunk of change to date. We raised about $7 million to date, and the last round closed at the end of 2019. We, at the beginning of the pandemic, made a strategic decision to drive towards creating a sustainable business that could, survive a pandemic, survive, a potentially, Republican Senate or presidency or whatever was happening. And that all changed very recently. And there's a certain level of exuberance and opportunity, advocates in the space knowing that there's going to be a very, very strong push for legalization over the next 2 years, because there's a high likelihood that we could lose control of the Senate or the House in the next go around. So 2 years, like pressing hard to make things happen at the federal level. For us, there's certain opportunities that have arisen, and so we're considering kind of, I wouldn't call it a Series A raise, but reopening our seed round a little bit, or doing an extension in the very, very near future. I just got out of a board meeting earlier today where we're kind of discussing it, but no definitive direction here in the public forum, I guess.
And thank you to everyone who is patient with us today. We normally start at 11. We started at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. So thank you for everyone who did that. And so one of the questions that we've got, Ben, is, so fundraising, they can contact you directly. They can contact
You can contact me. It's B, the letter B, at vertosa.com. So, and I think the Vertosa spelling somewhere. Yeah.
Great. And we'll share the URL again at the end. And so James Bodian has got a question. So as the head of a company, what type of problems or challenges do you come across due to marijuana not being federally legal? So what are those, for example, from banking onwards, what are some of those challenges?
Time management at the end of the day is the hardest thing as a business leader in the cannabis space. It is, in normal circumstances, call it tech software. It is a very challenging role for any executive, not just the CEO, but for anyone trying to run a company. It is your life, and it often takes you away from your family, your friends, and any other normal course of business. In the cannabis industry, it's harder, because you're managing things like bank accounts shutting down, or negotiating with third-party service providers because they refuse to serve someone in the cannabis industry, or they put you through more rigorous due diligence, or an ungodly number of other things that just, even if it's another 5 minutes out of your day, that's 5 minutes not being spent on building your business. Not to mention advocacy, navigating difficult supply chains, and doing all that. all that said, for someone like me, that's where the opportunity lies. Because with every time there's a constraint or a challenge, there's an opportunity. And so if you figure that out and you know how to navigate it and you can make it easier for someone else to navigate, then you're creating value. And at the end of the day, that's the job of an entrepreneur, to create value for people. So, I take it, this is what I tell myself, this is how I keep myself going, right? It's just like, this is the opportunity, but yeah, it's phenomenally hard to not have federally protected banking for cannabis companies. Like that is the most low hanging fruit that the federal government can do to help all of us. Because not only does that make life easier and I don't have to manage 3 different entities with 6 different bank accounts, I would be able to maybe market like a normal company because Facebook, Instagram, as people probably know, shut down cannabis companies constantly, and you can't advertise on them. And those are the most prolific advertising platforms for other companies, like direct-to-consumer marketing, all that kind of stuff. Like we have to be super creative in the cannabis industry. And again, opportunity. There's been businesses built around accessing consumers that aren't on those traditional platforms, but all that kind of stuff would just make normal course of business that much easier.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot more kind of points of friction for sure. But
investment too. I mean, the investor pool is smaller. It's getting bigger every year. We're really excited about the strides we've made. Like, put me in Silicon Valley outside of the cannabis industry. I'm like a very small fish, but like coming in the cannabis industry, it's like, oh, Ben's from Silicon Valley. I was like, he's a Silicon Valley investor. And I'm like, no one would ever call me that in Silicon Valley.
yeah, right. No, and fundraising can be a full-time job, right? So
absolutely.
Before we jump off, and I'm definitely going to think about some other investors that we need to bring into the team, but one of the questions that I ask Ben when I do these is something that I first did at a Shabbat dinner in LA at this like family of musicians, and then all these other amazing musicians came in, and basically it's a question about a rose, a thorn, and a bud. So, and it can be your personal life or with Vertosa. But the rose is like, what is happening right now that you're really grateful for, or excited, or happy about? And your thorn is, what's a big challenge or a struggle for you individually or for the business. And then the bud is, what are you most looking forward to, or what are you most hopeful about? So would love to hear yours for right now.
Oh, wow. This is great.
I'm putting you on the spot. See, I didn't just going to ask because I want the authentic side.
The rose certainly is just, my company, my family, and myself being able to take the last 10 months or however long we've been in this pandemic and just like seeing the positive in it and taking every opportunity to make the best of it. And I've become a lot closer with my family. I had a daughter that was born April 28th, which was at the height of hysteria. We were in a hospital that felt like a ghost town, but like up until this week when I traveled for the first time, I saw her every day. And that absolutely did not exist with my son when he was born. I was working a lot, traveling a lot. And it's my wife actually understands what I do now. She knows how hard I work. It's made our relationship that much better. And the company, just to see the resilience and how quickly people can adapt and just survive and keep fighting for what they believe in. And at the heart of it, we've built a really strong core around our core values, and we know that every day that we're going to figure it out because we have to. So that's my rose. I feel like it's provided me an opportunity to just actually, in a weird way, be happier. And And I'm fully aware that not everyone's in that position, and so that's why it's my rose. I feel very, very fortunate for it. I don't take it for granted. I know how hard it can be, and the cannabis plays a big role in kind of helping solve that for a lot of people. So any work I can do there is great. I think the thorn is just how long and arduous this change is, and I don't think people quite understand just how difficult it is. Every part of it, like every inefficiency in the supply chain, in the business, and the amount that people are trying to tax it and take advantage of this budding industry, it takes away from margins in running a company. So it imagine, even successful companies in the space are struggling to run like a responsible business, because there's just money going to so many different things. Like the number of lawyers that I have to pay, the number of accountants, like it's not an exaggeration to say we have like engagements with at least 10 different law firms, or 5 different accountants, because that's what it takes to run a cannabis business, especially international, multi-state operator, right? So that's a massive thorn. And again, the bright side is that every incremental step that we make forward actually makes business easier. And so since we're kind of calibrated to this challenge, something like my bud, the new administration, a mixed race woman being in the White House finally, it's such a, it's kind of like my backdrop here is just like this ray of sunlight that just immediately created hope when it felt very dark leading into the first week of the new year. So 2021 is here. For me, it officially started this week, and I'm just really excited what we're going to be able to accomplish together as a community and as an industry.
Me too. I agree. I feel like this week I've had more hope and energy and just positivity than I have and I'm generally positive, as you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little too much so. Like always find reason to be in gratitude, but yeah, I agree. I think 2021 is just it's going to be a good year. Certainly at least a lot more predictable. I'm sure that there will still be some challenges. There will still be surprises, some things that we can't predict. But
I heard Biden had like a Peloton or something that's really controversial.
Yeah, if that's the least of our worries, then, I think we're
Fox News needs to report something, so I guess that was it.
I know. Yeah. I'll have to be careful on mine. Cool. Well, it's been such a pleasure. Oh, and you were saying, sometimes it's like, just something to help you get to sleep or it's a social tonic. And I think that's how they are marketing it Canuary, because everyone who doesn't want to drink. And this one is 2 milligrams THC, 4 milligrams CBD. And a lot of times I'll just have one of these after dinner, and it's just nice and relaxing. I have a deep sleep. And if people are interested in that product, I have a code ANGEL, and that one you can get 25% off. So we need some more of those for our Vertosa partners. I've been pushing my code out, ANGEL, so people can get 25% off of these products, because I just love them.
Yeah, and Jake and Luke at Can have been doing an amazing job, both with the company and the brand, but also in the community, taking a leadership role with Cannabis for Black Lives, joining us as board members for the Cannabis Beverage Association. It's just a really great community partner, and that's unsolicited because, we don't infuse that product. So, it's about the rising tide. At the end of the day, we're all here to just create a better industry and more access to these beautiful products.
Yeah, and more great products. I'm ready for them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome, Angel. Thank you so much for this. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, likewise. All right, you take care and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.